He's going to kick it off here just because my laptop's vanished somewhere around the house. Hey, Emil. Morning. Hi, Emil.
Hey, good morning, Lucian.
Good to see you.
You too.
We're just kicking off this. We're just on my phone right now, but we're just opening it up here. How are you doing today?
Pretty well.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just cut off this meeting.
Right.
Can you hear us?
What's good, everybody?
Yep. Yeah.
Welcome. It's an hour later for you, Emil. You like that?
Yeah, I'm a little more awake.
Back to your morning practice?
Yep, basically.
I'm curious, do you use sound in the mornings, or do you have a different kind of a meditation practice? Like, what, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, totally. It's always a little different, but I usually incorporate sound. I like doing sound and movement together. There's a thing I kind of do where I will stretch open on poses, then I'll use sound to also move energy in those parts of my body. And yeah, it's just really nice and mostly very intuitive. Also, didgeridoo in the morning is a great way to just open up.
Yeah, I should do that. I should do that. I've got my didge outside my room.
Yeah, so sometimes I'll go through phases of that being my morning practice.
We're all, for the most part, I'd say 90% of our house circle of 8 is we're Vedic meditators, so we have mantra, which silent, but also very much sound. You know, it's my own personal sound signature, and we each have our own. And we start every day at 7 o'clock, meditating together in that fashion. And I'm curious about that. It'd be good, Lucian and Brian, I think, to host that, maybe have a little sound.
Yeah.
Get the didge out or the bowl. We have everything. We have all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so powerful.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, yeah. Well, morning, Andrea.
Morning or afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Where are you?
I'm in Omaha right now. I was in Phoenix for most of the quarantine, and now Omaha.
We were chatting yesterday. We think Omaha might actually be a bit of a problematic name?
Yes, why?
Calling it Project Omaha? Oh, yeah.
What?
Project Omaha?
Have I called it Project Omaha? You guys tried to name it that.
So Leo did, and we adopted based on Leo's very strong recommendation. But I actually think the science of sound is gonna
No, I'm fine with what the original was.
Yeah.
I think it's just the tag name of Project Omaha.
Maybe call it internally Project Omaha. But
yeah, because we have the aviation center in Omaha and Strategic Air Command and things like that, and they actually do have programs called these things. So
yeah. Yeah. I know Leo was very enamored.
He was all on it. And I was just like, you can call it whatever you want, but we'll probably call it something different. It'll be an internal thing, but yeah, Project Omaha actually is used in a lot of aviation aspects, and actually they used it for football and kind of secret things. They name it for different cities. So I mean, it could also be alien, you never know.
Yeah, just so Emil and Shane are kind of tracking the working title for the Matrix / Institute. It became Project Omaha as an internal title.
Yeah.
But as far as something that's going to not alienate any sound, we want this to be as kind of a planetary institute of sound.
Yeah, so you would call it science of sound, or along those lines. You wouldn't get away from sound, and you wouldn't get away from the science and the artistry.
Exactly.
Because it's like the Science and Art Institute of Sound.
Yeah.
Like you have both sides of it that are going to show up.
And so this is a good case in point for us to discuss, because what we've been in reflection, we had a conversation over dinner last night, is like maybe one of the ways to like forward the game is to be kind of almost like a game meets accelerator, like an accelerated accelerator. And I mentioned a little bit of this on the call, but we've been kind of like hammering it out, saying what would it look like to do, to invite people just to one game, but then each game produces then a retrospective week where we reflect on, okay, what were the projects that came from that week? And then who do we then want to go forward as, which leaders want to come forward? Because like part of it is like capacity and like
availability,
capacity,
well.
availability, motivation, desire for people to take projects forward. And we basically give it a week for us to say, okay, if we were to kick off a new game the like 2 weeks later with a week in between, would that be spacious for us to find new players around specific projects? Like we go into this round 2 with the projects, and it's a focused effort to kind of evolve those projects. And we were thinking that it would be a 12-week program. And so you wouldn't necessarily, like, you don't need to be part of the whole 12 weeks. You could just come in for the first week. But each week it's a bit of a stopgap that allows new people to come into the process.
Yeah, it's like you guys always needed integration.
Yeah, it's kind of like
otherwise it's like you keep on going on top of each other.
Exactly. It's almost like a flywheel through the 12 weeks. And so somebody that completed a full cycle would be someone that completed 6 games over a 12-week period. And that at the end of that would be like a demo day and a deliverable. And like, that would be like a kind of, because otherwise we're too much in the realm of synthesis of collective intelligence and ideas with that. And like, what we don't want to lose is the energy that's here for people to actually like manifest into reality these projects that are being proposed.
Yeah, you want an artifact to come out of this.
Exactly. Artifact beyond the synthesis of ideas, of recommendations, because that is like, we can be proud of our effort of a week together to come out with an artifact of like 8, what is the collective intelligence? And maybe that's like the total goal for week 1 is like what are the kind of 8 things that people are most drawn to in this community? And then week 2 is, okay, like, how do we pick those and like take what's our roadmap for the next 12 weeks, like, 6 of them being active, and then who might we want to get involved? Because that way we could then empower people like yourself to go and say, okay, who would be perfect to join the next round of game to forward this is so and so, and you actually have a framework and a kind of supporting methodology for how to bring the institute into manifestation.
It's like the food, you're going into food, which is kind of a polarity of sound. It's like sound is like the creative, and then you have food, but it's like you're setting an ambiance with having food, and it's like having the right type of music actually creates a better digestion, less stress than a noisy atmosphere. So I have a lot of people in the restaurant industry that's like looking at how music actually can help a person stay more grounded while they're eating versus putting them into a vagal hijacking or amygdala hijack, which is what you see in fast food places. So it's just like those things. It's like, so I can see where the games can go all different directions with it, but I just see that everything is, you want to have a deliverable, you want to have an artifact, but you also see like, okay, we have all these different things that are available that we can actually build upon, like genealogy or psychology or any of those things. It's like, because they could go into food or community or any of these other different areas.
Yeah.
So it's like you have new game players always coming in. I mean, I'm not sure which model you guys are following but that you're creating, or layering into. But I think it's beautiful that you've allowed a week in between of integration, because otherwise we become more of a, we're creating too quickly without integrating.
Yeah.
Well, it's ultimately week one. I just want to say again, we're learning as we go. You know, we've had this creative burst, and we know we have something that's special. It's felt, and all the feedback we're getting is great. But the further we go down the line, and you guys are kind of out front with us, and this is coming into form. And one of the big lessons quickly was week one really is a sprint. It was over and gone like that. And we also were sprinting. So we got a lot accomplished, but it is just that baseline. And it was so like enriching that it was like, wow, we really have something here. What are the next steps? And then like walking into those next steps, and what's the best way to look like for that to look to do what the ultimate goal is, right? Which is to like get very tangible things funded and moving forward. So in that, I'm in the learning of, this is more like it could be a 12-week process, maybe even longer, you know, but to me, and from the aspect of the game, it's just, that was like level one that we did. And now this feels like level two, or like figuring out what level two looks like, and level three. So
are any of you guys gamers at all? Are any of you guys gamers at all? Like in the game field, or utilize like where they have different levels?
I mean, we've been tracking. We actually just bought the new PlayStation with a research.
So that's a good learning.
Yeah. We thought this was like the best research project, you know, like let's go and like try as many games as possible to like.
Well, I think there's like in Minecraft where they have a library of people that, I have a lot of friends that are gamers, and they create artifacts within the game that it's like, if you only get to certain levels, you get to what you need. And that could be a library of information that people have written from all over the world that is hidden within a game. So it's like, I don't know, it's a really cool, I mean, I love the idea of games, but it's like games for life that it's like, we're always playing in.
Yeah, the game for life. And also the you know, part of what we've been thinking is that you need to go through certain levels to get access to, you know, we can share this openly. We were like, how do we reimagine the Eleusinian mysteries into like a place where the only way to get to the greater mysteries is like have a certain amount of civic commitment to the commons, and then like more and more and more you kind of like we create the mystery. You know, because a lot of brands have been very successful where it's like you only get to go to this concert if you volunteer this amount of hours, and that's actually a very successful model. And part of what we've been thinking is like, is there a way for us to like uniquely reward people that are like, as we're thinking about incentives? What would, you know, I want to take a difficult thing of like trying to talk less and listen more here, into like what your reflections of like, if you were in our shoes right now, given your direct experience of what you had, like, what do you think, where could we offer most value for this to become what I feel like all of us are seeing this has got the potential to become?
You mean in the field, like in just sound only, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think sound, that's the beauty of the focus, is like we do have a particular like, you know, it's a contained audience and a focused topic. So I guess from your position right now, like, you know, we hadn't gone into the game talking about 12 weeks. We hadn't thought about that. We thought these would propagate themselves, but it's like part of this is like, how do we make sure that these like initial saplings of like community projects grow into great trees?
I think it's something, Joshua, I think you had said something about like you play the didgeridoo to like get grounded in the morning. Is that what I heard you say earlier?
Emil saying that, yeah.
Oh, Emil said that, but it's like having those type of experiences where we're able to just somatically ground in after it is like the beauty of sound. And if looking at hospitals, healthcare systems, you're in a noisy environment. You're in a dinging everything happening all the time, even in in-home care markets. And to have sound or creating some type of buffer system that allows for the person to actually hear themselves or give them time to actually be in a space of healing versus being pulled externally to, I hear, like I had a surgery long time ago for my appendix, and I got my anesthesia. I could hear everything during my anesthesia because they didn't give me enough stuff to to keep me under. But my sensory, I was hearing all the other different things that were happening. So you're in a surgery in a very traumatic experience, but then you're already hearing other things that are going to put you into more trauma. So it's like, can we create surgery centers that are creating more of a womb-like experience or some type of, per se, instrumental where it's not pulling you out, it's actually keeping you more grounded. So it could be like didgeridoo or any of those instrumentals that are more grounding in structure, but don't take you out too far. Because I think sometimes there's sound bowls, crystal bowls sometimes, and maybe Shane, you can talk to this, where it can take you really far out, but sometimes you need the sound to keep you in. So that's just my way of looking at it, just because I've had it where sound can take me really far out, but I've had it where it's been a beautiful thing to keep me more grounded. And in a healing capacity, sometimes it's better to stay grounded than disassociated.
Yeah. And how,
but it depends, each person is unique, like that's
totally. When you're thinking about, like, one thing I shared yesterday over dinner is like, how when we're thinking about play and we're thinking about these like rituals that we want to bring in, like how do we bring them into the game in an elegant way that's repeatable and like create something that has the narrative of the game forming. So like there was a reason we started with sound as a as a kind of transcendent experience, cultural layer that we're trying to imbue the game with.
So what, I guess I have a question back. What did you guys at Savannah House feel when you were like, let's do sound as our first game? What did you picture it as, like, from your perspective? Because I know you guys all have different unique perspectives on sound in its own way.
We were driven really by Sarah's inspiration with Emil around sound, and it quickly resonated with us. I'm a sound alchemist myself, as well as several others in the house. So it really called to us because in our own practice, like it's a baseline thing for us, and it's close to us within community as well. So we knew we could like quickly gather the right kind of people, which we did. Initially that was based around like having opportunity for people dying of COVID that have to be alone to be like to have sound in their ears. And that was like grounding sounds like didgeridoo, crystal bowls to help you with the process of transition to the voices of humans that you love that can be heard. And then quickly as that was put into the field of the circle that we put together, it got a lot broader, a lot quicker. And then we felt like, okay, like we went too far down one particular path with this specific thing for this specific disease. Let's take COVID off of the title. Let's broaden
COVID's just the top layer of many other different disease states.
Right. And then it was like, then we went into this week, had the game, then spit out 8 different directives, all of them very powerful and we're all excited about. And now we're like, okay, how do we push forward with this broad of a thing? Because our game plan initially was like one thing. This is how we'll dial it in. We'll go with this small, not small is not the right word, but one specific solution, and then go forward with that to funders and to networks and like do that whole bit. But once we got this broad, then it was like, okay, wow, now we have like all these things that we want to go down, and multiple people within the circle that we created in the game level like want to follow. So how do we, the question that Lucian was really asking a minute ago is like, how do we create the right kind of vehicle as the people running this Unified Planet game to empower all of those different ideas and take them further. So is that further levels in the game and longer extended periods and picking specifics, So we're like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like we wanted to hit a home run and we didn't just hit a home run. It like went way out of the park. And we're like, where'd the baseball go? You know what I mean? Like everyone's
fired and you got it.
Yeah, it's almost a little overwhelming of like, okay, wow, how do we like really, because for us in our hearts and in our integrity and like who we are, like we want to like bring it home for everybody and create the right platform where everyone feels empowered and can do it. Because another big theme for all of this was this free-flowing freedom for it to be open sourced and co-opted and shared, and with that like shared responsibility and stuff as well. So how can we like create a structure and empower people, but also give them the freedom to go do and let it be as they feel called?
I might actually be able to offer something to that.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah.
And I'm just going to speak openly. One, to the experience and practice of what we did in the game, and then also I know I go back to this a lot, but the reason why I go back to this a lot is because it's still very fresh in my experience, and then also just because of the impact that it helped really strategize my focus of intention. And when I was part of Founders Institute, starting back in October, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Founders Institute. If you're not, I suggest looking it up. They're a completely Silicon Valley based pre-seed accelerator program constructed by some of the most successful CEOs in entrepreneurship and startup programs and all this kind of stuff. It was like started by Elon Musk and like a whole other slew of CEO friends and people who have, they've raised over $800 million. I don't need to give their discog, but let's just say they know what they're doing. From a space of reflection about what we did through the game, combined with my experience at Founders, I think, the intention to come up with these projects within a week's time, I think, granted, is a really poignant goal. And realistically, I'm not going to say it failed, because that's not the word I want to use. I think it's a really high impact of being able to do that within a week, especially given a certain topic, and especially I think as you all move forward and as we all contribute to this, not even just us, I'm talking about every single person that you begin to create these initiatives through. I think it's going to be it's going to be varied, because of certain applications are going to have certain abilities to streamline very quickly versus other ones that are more kind of, I don't want to say theoretical, but more so of like, they're going to have their other variables of how quickly they can implement. And so part of what I'm getting to is that I think given certain topics, particularly now more specifically speaking to the sound for health, to be able to fully move towards a place of being able to have a deliverable by the end of it, I think would have to go through a certain amount of cycles before you can fully, have a tangible product that can be something that can be executed. And given my experience of what we went through, given also my own experience of moving through my own process around some of the projects that I've taken part in, as well as my own intentions of trying to bring more of the business aspects of how to bring sound to a more global, scalable way, and to make it as cost efficient and easy on every single person that's involved. My thought process for the game would be to, instead of, yes, do it every week, but almost extend it to 4 weeks. And what I mean by that is that each week has a specific intention. And the first week could be like theorem, where what we did is the example of that, where you bring in all these minds together, you come up with the theories of what is important. Second week would be synthesis, which would then create more tangible structure to like what is the field currently working in. And then third would be almost kind of like implementation and execution. And then fourth would be traction, in being able to create kind of like, you know, a broader scope of what you guys are attempting to create, while also still being able to give a very, very singular focus to each week. So then that way, the first week of, you know, theorem is getting everybody's ideas together. Week 2, which would be synthesis, is now actually looking at the real world field and beginning to create practicum around, you know, okay, what can we actually do with what we created in the theory process? And then implementation would be like, okay, now let's actually look at where aspects of funding, aspects of like all of our connections and resources really allow us to bring the first energy of the first 2 weeks together. And then by fourth week, you know, you can actually really take a stronger look at like, okay, now we can actually go talk to the funders, to the founders, to all of these things to create some type of synergy of being able to move things forward. And that could be on that could be applicable to every field of question that you first, you know, derived from theorem into synthesis.
2 questions for you on that, Shane, is one, do you see those 4 weeks running like over a 4-week period or over an 8-week period with a week in between? And 2, do you see the same people committing to those 4 weeks, or do you see each week being essentially a new gate to bring more people in and have like the existing team, like basically, you know, it's like the team adapts on a week by week basis?
I suppose, just to be devil's advocate, I could play on this idea from both sides of the spectrum. On one hand, to speak to the idea that everybody is consistent, and what I mean by that is that no new players come in. And the reason being, and I'm going to speak to this side of the spectrum because of the fact that the more players that you involve, the more that everybody has to catch up. And if they're not part of the original synthesis of the theorem, then they're kind of like, it's almost kind of like, I'm trying to think of what would be a good analogy, but as I'm trying to think of a good analogy, you know, because people are gonna, you know, because if somebody gets inserted, you know, like say around like week 3, and they weren't part of week 2 or week 1, they're gonna have to do all this kind of like backpedaling to like try to catch up to where everybody else is in kind of already in synchronicity with one another and in an alignment. Some people, you know, for good cause, might be able to just drop into it much faster because they're just like, oh, cool. No, I totally understand this because I'm totally on the same level. I've been thinking of the same thoughts and all this kind of stuff. So creating that type of synergy is, yes, I think is completely available and could completely work. And then on the other side of that spectrum, having people come in where maybe they have fresh ideas, maybe because they haven't been looking at it for the past 2.5 weeks of just digging into this. And then like, you know, it really kind of adds this flavor of like newness to it so that, you know, somebody can kind of come in and be like, oh, you guys have been looking at it all this way. Not that you're wrong, but why don't you try looking at it this way? And then that completely, you know, creates another flower of explosion of ideas and all this kind of stuff that helps reiterate or refresh some of the stagnant energy that might be, you know, sticking around. So from that perspective, you know, which one is the better is a little challenging for me to be able to fully speak to in this moment.
As you say that, Shane, what comes to me is like the idea in my mind around like there's a certain collective in week 1 and they walk through that process. It's like the birthing. And then some people in that week 1 can drop off. And then the next couple weeks or week is like more of a core team that starts to follow these certain lines, right? And then people that were there for week 1, let's say that's like some, you know, the philanthropist that has a lot of resources that wants to kind of be there at the birthing and be like, okay, this interests me, I'm about it. I'll circle back with you guys in 2 weeks and see where you've landed kind of vibe. So a container set, but then you have more of a core group that carries it forward. But then the people in the beginning or the container set can kind of circle back and be that fresh perspective that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But also a container still held. So you're there at the birthing and you have an understanding. So it's not as much about trying to catch everybody up.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Yeah, and I mean, I actually this, and thanks for reminding me of this by suggesting all that stuff, because I was it was another thought I was going to have was because I think spreading the game out over this, theoretically for it like 4-week process or 8-week process, as Lucien is talking about it, having the space in between in between weeks, would be that then you have more time for cross-pollination. Instead of the cross-pollination needing to be this kind of immediacy of, because as we saw from this past week, so many people were like, oh my God, I want to speak to this, or oh my God, I want to speak to that. Like, because there's this, kind of, everybody has their kind of either expertise or desire to, of experience in those particular areas to then offer suggestions that may or may not move the game forward, but at least gets it out of them, so that then, like, okay, cool, like I feel complete, that I didn't miss out, and that there's no FOMO, and that there's actually more JOMO, like in the joy of like, cool, I may have missed out on that, but at least, like I've said my piece. And so from that, because then the whole group, not just the core teams, for each particular topic, can actually feel like they've made a full spiral around around all of the topics. So then everyone is heard, everyone is recognized, everyone has been able to make a contribution, and then by the end of implementation, by particularly like traction, this is another way that I think, Lucien, as you were talking about the other day, in terms of these value currency systems and how you give time and all of this kind of stuff, I think this could be another aspect of how we are able to create currency through our time as contribution. Because then, instead of it just being like, oh, well, I only contributed by these standards to this particular topic or goal, it's like, no, I was able to contribute to everything, and I still accrued points for all of my contributions. So then that way it the system is self-regulating in that way, that everybody gets to contribute, and it's not just like based off of your expertise or based off of your interest, this is the only things you got to contribute to. Just a suggestion.
Yeah. Shane, how does it, as you've been speaking, I've been getting this like strong hit around like a framework of what you're describing that Rachel introduced to us, called Seed, Sprout, Blossom, Harvest. Just for argument's sake, if we were to do an 8-hour journey for, in any particular week, 4 hours of yin, 4 hours of yang, and that journey was, the first one was seed. We were then to have a break off, and it was an 8-week program with 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. And it's also the weeks off don't necessarily mean like nothing's happening. It's like things can happen that week, but there's not the time in the schedule. And each week, so like week 1, week 3, week 5, week 7 would be would be really specific, where we would go and like try and say, okay, by the end of seed, this is like what we see as like, this is the goal. By the end of sprout, this is the goal. And each week is an invitation to those playing the game to add others in that could be helpful, because this is one of the biggest things we've seen in I think I shared, I've spent the last 12 years working with social change communities, and one of the biggest things is how you onboard new members and get members up to speed. It's like one of the constant issues that communities face, because most of them don't create gates with which to add people in. So they literally drip people in, and then those people that come back basically feel like they're entering a conversation that they haven't been party of creating. and a culture, and so they feel like they don't feel fully like
invested
in members of the community is often a problem that people have. And the flip side of that, you get coordination fatigue from the people that are running the community, because they end up being the kind of like, every new person that onboards ends up being a very heavy burden for those in leadership positions, because they're essentially tasked with onboarding those people. So if we can design structures in place to bring people in, that's like a really, really like, that's a kind of community massive hack that would be very valuable. And so just thinking, how does that sound as a structure? Because it kind of fits our fractal of the week, you know, it's like yin yang weeks, 8 weeks, you know, we kind of like 8 around here. But as a, you know, as a way, like four thematic areas does feel like, you know, it takes the pressure off a little bit to say like, the goal for this week is to seed the 8, like what are the 8 things, and then like
right.
The goal for the next week would be to sprout them, and the goal for the, you know, how does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, that was it mirrors a similar process that we worked within Founders, where there were all these lead ups to almost essentially every 4 weeks we had to have some type of deliverable, where, you know, especially because it was like involving that we had to have like almost you know, a pitch deck, our financial numbers, you know, all this kind of stuff. So it all would lead up to this kind of fully distinguishable metric that, you know, came together, that had like real wheels to it, you know, by the end. And that, you know, there were all these kind of like mile markers, and it was paced out, you know, so that each week had a specific, like, okay, cool, like this is the topic we're discussing, these are the, you know, within this topic are these subtopics that we then have to address, and then you have homework and like all this stuff. I'm not saying that the groups need to have homework, but the ability to kind of create this cohesiveness of intention around playing to your strengths, revealing the weaknesses, and then creating a cohesion between what is the executable from shining light on all of these things. And then and then that week 1 would then build upon week 2, and then build upon week 3, and so forth. And then by the 4th week, it's like, okay, cool. You know, and then there's like this kind of like consistency level of being able to move, as you said, from from seed to sprout to harvest to, you know, and so forth and so on. And to speak slightly to the perspective around how to mitigate leadership not taking on the burden of bringing in new people. I'm still currently on the fence of how to fully even do that too, because you know, having either brought in sound healers or, you know, people into my production company to be part of our builds and all this kind of stuff, you know, has always been not necessarily challenging, because, you know, some people are really kinesthetic, they need to have their hands up touching everything, versus sitting, you know, versus other people who are completely visual and they need to look at slides and profiles and all this kind of stuff to like absorb all the information, and their theorem is their aspect of application. So I think, you know, being able to, I suppose another thing actually now, as this is coming through for me in the moment as I'm talking about it, as much as you mentioned yesterday that a survey was going to go out about like, hey, how was your experience? My suggestion would be anybody who you want to get involved in the game, not only per invitation or their excitement of wanting to participate, create a survey for them to like almost like a Google document for them to fill out. So then that way the information that they're filling can strategize like, okay, cool, you know, like Shane is his, you know, his number 1 and 2 is kinesthetic and visual. You know, person 2 is auditory and visual, and then, you know, and then that might help the learning skill process. So then that way, as teams kind of come together, you can kind of go back to the data and be like, okay, cool. These are the people who decided per their interest of how to be involved. And then the Savannah team can kind of give recommendations to not only the leaders of those teams, but also the people involved in them of like, okay, out of the 5 people here, a majority of you are actually all kinesthetic, or, you know, a majority of you are all
audio,
you know, like, or visual. So per recommendation, not that you guys have to do this, but you guys might be able to synthesize quicker if you guys implement these particular, you know, these particular applications of how you guys work together. And then, you know, like love languages might help, you know, like just so
What comes to mind for me is like the gene keys of like how you fit into this accelerator in the sprint and like finding the right fits for people for certain roles, so they can almost be clued into like, here's how you can best be of service.
So like the human design aspect where you're looking at the different layers of like, are they a changer? Are they an agent? Are they a dancer?
Yeah,
Any of those
exactly.
things. And it's like, you're playing in this field, but then you can come to this and actually cohesively build something from that.
And
Yeah,
then,
I think it's beautiful to do that.
because
Just the layer.
then also too, when you start moving into the cross pollination process, you know, where, you know, let's say after week 1 or week 2, you know, enough energy has been created through theorem and synthesis that it's like, okay, cool, now we can break out into all the other players who were part of the other teams. You know, we can see their level of contribution, we can see what was created through the other teams, and then through the cross-pollination process, see how we can actually find like one person, let's see, one team was incredibly kinesthetic and then another team was completely visual. Let's bring some of those people into this team and see, like, from their expertise and their values and all of what they were able to achieve, let's see how, because of the other side of the spectrum that they experience in terms of how they learn and how also they apply their expertise, can, you know, you know, possibly bring in new fresh ideas. Or there might be synergy between 2 teams that were entirely kinesthetic, and let's just swap them to see what happens, you know. And I mean, obviously, in terms of optimization of team synergy, you know, you'll have to play with it to figure out, you know, like whether
that feels really good though.
It feels really
spot
spot
on.
on. It's like intuitively feels like a memory from the future, you know. It's often how I relate to these things is like, does this feel familiar to me, even though it's the first time I've heard of it.
Because I remember one of the last founders classes that I was involved in before I had to kind of drop out. There was a self-made billionaire who was there, and he has a consulting company, I think, called Scorpion Consulting or something like that. And he was talking about how almost quintessentially how their consulting company works, because they help tackle, like, you know, global ideas, global problems, all this kind of stuff. People basically pay them like thousands upon thousands of dollars to like figure out, like, okay, cool, how do you deal with this particular issue? And it was funny because he was talking about how the way he was pairing up his teams was that he would find these like incredibly high level geniuses who have no emotional intelligence, or maybe like very low emotional intelligence. And then he would essentially assign them a babysitter. And this was actually the term that they used. And the babysitter was somebody who not necessarily didn't have any like high intelligence, but actually had an incredible level of emotional intelligence, so that the person could basically completely, you know, like the high level genius who's like super mathematical, all left brain oriented and all this kind of stuff, can really focus on what they need to do. And then you have your person of emotional intelligence who basically piggybacks off of them and is like, you know, kind of just like nurturing them and is like, I wouldn't say like rubbing their feet, but, you know, from a metaphorical perspective, like, you know, just kind of like not fully catering to them like a slave, but more so of just being able to really gauge, like, okay, cool, you know, they've been sitting at their computer for 8 hours, you know, like just hammering away, like, let me just check in with them, like, hey, are you doing okay, like, do you need any coffee, you know, like all this kind of stuff. And I know that's like super simplistic, but the reason why I bring up the example is just more so of like being able to notice, you know, like playing to people's strengths and then up leveling their weaknesses by being able to supplement it through another person's
That feels
strengths.
so good to me. That feels like another aspect of, ultimately, as we were landing on the up game, it was becoming a sprint. All of us have had some kind of experience in that, and it was always very yang. So it was like, we want this like balanced approach. That's where the yin and yang thing came from. And we're working actually with that languaging as well and using the term yin and yang. But for now, it was like having that balance. And even as you speak to that, there's like so many layers of that balance. And having somebody that's very left brain, working with someone that's very right brain, feels like that. Having practices for both to participate in brings out the strengths in everyone.
Yeah.
To me, this makes me think again of like deeper learnings and like what you're talking about and things that have worked for other accelerators or other sprints, and then bringing in the medicine that is the unified planet to bring balance to that. Because that's something that's also a big piece for us. Frankly, the yin part of our first sprint was very easy. We got on Monday and was like, hey, who wants to provide some sound? And there was like, we're in a sea of us. But if we're working with like in food, where's the yin going to come from?
Oh, it'll come.
Of course it will. Of course.
With the food, somebody could be like a recipe or a class of some sort.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of creativity that comes out from that.
I share that, and what I was getting to is like empowering people to, again, like it's not on us to figure out like what's the yin, like empowering the group to be like, you're creating this. We're helping facilitate it, but like you're the creator of this.
Yeah.
In this open source sharing, that's what we're trying to come from in the spirit of the collective.
Yeah.
It's all inspired by what we're all going through in these times of COVID and how we're coming together, and we're seeing systems that need changing. We want to be a vehicle for that, and we want to do that in a good way.
Because I think too, like from my experience being in the field for so many years and now having met so many different sound healers throughout my journey, collaborated with so many, spoken to so many because of just, coordinating the sound temples at festivals, like literally booking this content like consistently for almost the past 6 years. One detriment that I've seen within that ultimately will play to a certain level of strength within the sound healing community is that a lot of sound healers just don't, and this isn't implicit of anybody on this call or anybody involved in this group, but like a lot of sound healers lack the business formality of being able to bring what they do to a scalable process that not only just supports them like in their just like their life journey, but also be able to like create real tangible revenue that can really expand more of their projects and support for other community projects. And so I think just by that example, being able to work within the field of, as people come into this, whether they're core team players, whether they're new people, through the kind of like filling out of the survey, you can really gauge, like, okay, like what is your business experience? Like what is your experience in the field? Rank, how often you perform per week, or like, are you doing more singular focus with individuals? Are you doing stuff more with groups? Are you involved with, more like larger group experiences and all this kind of stuff? So then you can really gauge like a person's expertise level on which particular area, because as seen from this particular group, there are more of us who like are like, oh no, I work more with one-on-one, and then like me, for instance, like I don't do one-on-ones anymore because of just like how much energy it takes me to deal with one person. So it's like I would prefer to have things be, I don't want to say more lucrative, but it's like easier for me to have things be more lucrative by being able to cast a wider net. And then through all of these kind of varieties of applications, you can then kind of like strategize like within a team of each particular topic. Let's say it has 4 people. It's like, okay, cool, you can buddy up a person who has done groups, and then there's another person who's done singles, and then another person that's done groups, and another person that's done singles, so that then they can not only all learn from each other, but then, you know, each of them have their areas of expertise within business, within you know, social entrepreneurship and all this kind of stuff, so that then there is kind of like this more synergistic biofeedback process that happens through, everybody grows through the process, rather than some people feeling like they're falling behind because they're like, wow, I don't have your life experience, I have no idea what you're talking about. Robotic crystal bowls, like playing arms, is like completely far flung over my head, you know, like, and you know, because just like that, just by that even in idea and intention, like, you know, I've told that to a lot of sound healers, and a lot of them are like, you're like talking from like another world, like I just don't understand it. And I'm like,
I even felt that shame when I was like, I felt I was like doing some of the kind of marketing for you at one point on the call, and I felt I was being met with, I felt like you know, the people that stood outside the factories in like England in the Industrial Revolution, burning them down. I was like, oh, this is a sensitive topic.
yeah, I mean, and it truly is, and I appreciate that one, thoughtfulness, two, just you know, rawness of being able to speak to it, because like on one hand, I've actually, to be fair, I've gotten way more pushback than I've gotten way more support for the
yeah. And I like, so I, you know, when I hear an idea, you know, I don't have an agenda here other than like listening to like where my intuition leads when I hear other people's ideas, you know. And I was like, okay, there's a there in these crystal bowls. I'm playing crystal bowls. I can see the, you know, I can see it. So, I mean, but coming back to this, one way, and Emil, actually shoot in next with this point. So one thing we're thinking through is like, how do we be in right relationship with the groups that are coming together? And so partly what we're thinking is like, if we go into this like seed, sprout, blossom, harvest structure, that we're there like trying to identify who are the key players for seed. But then what we do is empower the players to identify who's needed for sprout. And so rather than us, like we can throw in our network, etc., but like rather than that be something that's led by us as founding players, we then like shift the game over to you to like bring in for each project any additional resources that are needed. And it's like we try and give you the resources as a way to like simply onboard and catch up those people. And so then like what relationship would we have like through that 8-week period up to the point of harvest? And then what does harvest look like? Because harvest would be great to have these projects actually become funded, or, you know, a pitch, a demo day type thing. So I'm going to leave that back. Emil, I know you had a point you wanted to raise.
Yeah, I really like all this conversation that's been happening, and it's so much I'm absorbing really quickly too, about, you know, different startup structures. And what really has been, you know, pinging me strongly is just the idea of there being a little more group development that is within the original groups, and finding who actually wants to work well together. Because I know for myself, I work very well with when I feel inspired, of course, when it's not like I have to push myself to have the energy to work on a certain project or with a group of people. I just do because I love it, and I'm just flowing and pouring through energy. So the fact of the matter that I noticed was that in the initial group I joined, puppy medicine. In the initial group I joined, I loved the people who I was discussing the project with, but I also feel like that wasn't yet the most ideal constellation of people to be working together. Like there wasn't just like the total free-flowing inspiration, and I feel like with more dynamic time for people to get to know each other somehow, and this is challenging because obviously we're in this Zoom world where it's like connections like this is a new thing for all of us. But I know that there are people who I would have like had really strong connections with even more easily, that then I would feel inspired, you know, like call them up now and be like, hey, let's get like a meeting going like for this week, and let's keep talking about this project and see who would we want, what organizations would we want to contact, what sort of funders, what can we bring back to Lucian and Savannah House to see how they can support us next. Whereas right now, I'd love more support, but I kind of want to, I don't feel like I have my group of people that I want to come with more support, asking for more support yet with.
Emil, do you feel that it would be most helpful for you to be able to like fish within the 22 people that we brought together, or be empowered for you to go and identify, okay, for soundscaping to like get to the next stage of like, our goal is to go from seed to sprout. So for soundscaping to go to sprout, we're going to need these people, and like you take the responsibility and we try and equip you with what you might need, just from a kind of credibility of the project and that kind of thing. That just helps when you're inviting people down and asking for people's time. But like, we're empowering you. And then what would be really interesting is if people are then empowered financially as well. So as players, then you get the ability, like if we raised budget, it would get really interesting for you to go and then you decide how that budget gets distributed based on like who gets asked in, because you in the field are probably going to, like, you're going to have a way better idea of who's needed than we are.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. And also what's interesting too is that partway through the game, of course we seeded this originally with this idea of sound healing into hospitals. And that actually is what I'm still most interested in doing. I actually kind of intentionally took a step away from that, because I was like, oh, there's David Gibson and there's these doctors and there's these people that seem like they have control of that. And so I kind of talked myself out of participating in that area. But now when I've felt my way into another area, I'm like, oh, now I have more clear idea that I want to come back to this like technology for quarantine patients to get live sound healing into there. So yes, I really like the idea of group leaders, like kind of getting to look into a pool of people that they feel most intuitively resonant with and invite people into their projects. And be empowered with some funding so that there's more incentive and more, relaxed on the survival oriented mindset for people that participate. I think that's a good step, a good idea that we can play with.
I like that. Thank you.
Particularly if there's like a game currency here that's based on like the collective effort of what everybody's bringing, there's something interesting here. So thank you, Emil. Serena, big welcome to you, and thank you for joining. We appreciate it.
Hi. It's nice to be here. You guys are awesome. It's so fun.
I love connecting with y'all too. It's so good.
It's just so fun.
Amanda messaged me saying like, I'm really missing every morning. I'm like, yeah, that's so confusing.
I shared yesterday with the house, like how, like yesterday, to get up on a Monday and to be like really thinking this through and wondering, having a lot of questions, like to have a call with more than a dozen people on it, like there and willing and just like offering their time to support, was just so like, it was such good medicine. It just opened up my heart and made me feel so loved and supported for myself, for this circle, and for all of us. Like, it means a lot. Like, people really care. We're trying to do a thing here. Like, I can't express my gratitude enough.
Well, I think on the other side, it was really heart opening for us too. I think having been doing this for so long and knowing that there's just this message, this deep message inside of each one of us, and being able to kind of hear other people's messages in that way and have, like Emil was saying, the doctors and the David Gibsons and, the Mark Hines and that guy, that French guy, right? There's so much flavor. There's so much like spiciness from everyone. And I don't know that I've had an international experience like that with sound healers. Of course, there's always these groups and collaborations for festivals and things like that. But to really just sit and share and have to do it virtually you guys created a new type of pollination. And I've had the beautiful experience of meeting you guys in person a couple times, but you guys have such big hearts, and we know that. We can feel that on the other side. And there's something really magical about what you guys are creating for each of these up games. And it's a pleasure to be a part of. So
I love you, Serena. Thank you.
love you guys. It's awesome. I feel so blessed that like I got to meet you guys before everything shut down. You know? So.
Sleep literally directly under the pendant you gifted me. Like it's you're a very part of my life. Yeah, no, thank you so much. And you know, this is you know, we are definitely we're listening carefully and like listening what, you know, what is this emergent process that is the game. You know, it's like many people have been thinking for a long time that a game is like a way of like driving systems change, and like we're in the micro detail of the first fractal. And so that feels really good because the energy's there and it's potent, and so it's, you know, people are wanting to see where it can go. And so you know, it feels to me like even just this hour call of like us applying collective intelligence of saying like, actually like, no, it's let's like rather than 12 weeks, let's do 8, like 4 seed, sprout, blossom, harvest.
Yeah.
Let's try that. Let's try at each gate, you know, a week on, week off. You know, we can go from, we don't need so many facilitators. Once we've gone from the seed, we actually reduce the number of facilitators so that we have the capacity to take on other topics where we're going to be applying that learning to. And every round of the game is going to be like a refinement of the game. You know, we're in a rapid, like, we're actually like forming the accelerator through the accelerator kind of thing. You know, it's like, and that's where I did a interview thing yesterday with, you know, there was
with Lucy, right?
Fun, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I love her. She's so cool.
Yeah, it was great. It was called the New World Game, and it was like this building bridges salon, and we had like people that I totally geek out in, like Howard Rheingold is the father of online communities. Someone outside, like I've known him for a while, but like he is literally the kind of godfather of our space. And to spend an hour presenting what we had done to like that group was just awesome. Junior, who wrote Inclusive Stakeholding, like all about future capitalism, like created, he's created more like more value, more patents around longevity of life than any other human in the world, and he's given them all into the commons, which is kind of a really powerful this life extension thing, and created this prizes around the commons. And so getting minds like that thinking about the game, I've just seen how people like it, you know, I've been in and around a lot of startup pitches, and so I can tell when something's got, you know, when something's got legs, it catches people, even if it's really nascent and new and early, it catches people. They're like, oh, you're doing a game around systems change, like tell me more. It's like, how do I be involved in that? So I think like there's a beautiful like strong roots here. And you know, I think like would love to meet again tomorrow, like digest this, sit with this, maybe just keep these, like try and keep these hour containers. And if you've got availability, I'll do a calendar invite before the morning. I'll do it now.
You're gonna do tomorrow at 11?
If that's okay, does that work?
Yeah, I have a call at 12:30, so I think I blocked off my morning.
Perfect. Yeah. That'd be great.
Are we keeping this 11 or 10?
11 Pacific for an hour.
Okay, good.
And what we'll do is just keep you in the loop and like keep this like feedback, so that by Friday we can figure out, okay, do we kick off next week? Or by Thursday, do we kick off next week with, you know, we're kicking off food for health, but do we also kick off the sprout rounds to sound? And if so, how do we support the projects? Because maybe round 2, we don't actually need 22 people. We just need the people that want to be involved, and we need to empower those people to bring anyone else. and not get too caught up on the 22 people kind of thing. Like that's a little bit of an arbitrary number anyway. We just made it up. Like
yeah, it's a good number.
like most things here, we're making it up as we go along and seeing what sticks.
I wanted to say something that someone shared with me yesterday, an executive coach I'm working with, that I think, Lucian, you do very well, but I wanted to share for everyone that it's been really working for me. And she reminded me again yesterday about it. And you said something earlier, Lucian, about feeling and intuition, or almost remembering a memory that's the future, but it's something you know. And she said that whenever you want to go from yin to yang or yang to yin, decide on how you're processing information. So for example, if there's an event that's coming up in your field, a virtual event these days, frankly, and you feel an intuition about it, that's your yin speaking about joining. But if you're thinking from the yang, which is like, this is going to be great for my business, I'm going to make connections, I'm going to get what I need from this, or it's going to be rewarding in some way, you're thinking in the yang. And so I wanted to share that when I decided to join this portal, I was thinking purely in the yin because of the recent experience I've had at Savannah House. And I think a lot of people were thinking in the yin too. So something that I just wanted to kind of bring to the forefront is you guys were talking about all these different ways of collecting information about people. I would also see if you can find out if they're yin or yang oriented and if they have both in them as well in that way. So using that language about what you're doing with your time with yin and yang as well as your inner compass. I don't know, that's coming strongly to me. I think you mentioned you're using more yin and yang language in your marketing. So you might want to take that down to a personal level of like what people are doing with their own yin and yang on a daily basis as well.
Yeah. And how does yin and yang sit with you versus, let's say, being and becoming? I'm conscious something, Brian, I just want to add a little bit more there without necessarily swelling, but something that Brian raised is that there's a lot of kind of, let's summarize it as cultural appropriation, spiritual terms, so that have like potent language. And so just, we don't want to be in the practice of that, but we also do want to, like, there's a reason yin and yang, it's kind of like a structurally coherent model of reality. And part of what we're trying to do is create a fractal of reality in the game. So there's deep intention behind its use. Yeah. Awareness of the possibility of cultural appropriation of something sacred that means
well
a lot of people.
Lucian, I think people need it right now, frankly, and are ready for it. A lot of terminology that we've seen, like the word synergy, for example, is like a done term. Like no more using synergy, no more using holistic approach, right? These things have already been done. And I feel like where we are as a society right now is deeper than that. And people actually are resonating with that more. People are more open to that. And the cultural appropriation, I mean, coming from a place where a lot of my culture has been appropriated in different ways, like, and whatever, that is what it is. Like, we actually, I think I welcome it now, because I think if the message is getting across and something is shifting in someone and it's changing the way that person is acting in terms of their own vibration, then yes, go ahead and do it. And that's what you guys are doing. You're changing the way someone is thinking about the financial systems we're involved with. And when you say game, the only connotation right now that is like heavily marketed in my head is Hunger Games. And so I would personally love a positive content, like Hunger Games is great, right? The story, everything else, but you can ask a young person or an old person about that word and they will tell you Hunger Games at some level. And so I love that you guys are reiterating and playing on the word game in like a new way. That's not this cheesy, like, I'm going to gamify a community. Like that's also, I feel like out of your, your vocabulary to say, right? But you're really taking a deeper, you're you're playing a game within a game. So you're going and helping people through different layers, right? You're creating layers of this game. And the deepest root of the game is this harvest that you're talking about. And so I think that these words are needed right now, frankly. And I don't think you should worry about cultural appropriation. Being and becoming, frankly, I think from the coaching world and stuff, it's kind of been done. I see that a lot when looking at other coaches' websites and stuff, and, you know, being the one versus becoming the one. And there's a lot of like terminology that I think is actually too fluffy and flowery. And yang and yin, like there's a darkness to it, and it is about bringing dark to light. It's not about being like, I think a lot of people get into this like spiritual trap that everything is like super positive, and that's what it's all about, positive thinking. And actually, no, it's about going through the mud. It's about drinking the medicine and feeling your dark and then transmuting that energy into something. And so I think yin and yang actually explores that more personally. But maybe there's also other words that do that. But I wouldn't worry about it too much, frankly.
God.
I don't know. That was a tangent. I smoked a bowl. I apologize.
Come every day to our brainstorms with the bowl, and then you just
it's
wait.
not live, right?
Yeah. You
It's
just
not live, right? Okay.
No, we just,
okay.
we record these, but it's not live. So, and that's something else as well, is like, I actually made a bit of a strong point on this yesterday, that would love, like, maybe this is something to bring tomorrow, but I'll leave that with everyone, as given it was just raised, which is like, I feel people carry so much trauma from literally like people that look like me in closed rooms. I'm talking white men in closed rooms making decisions about how society is structured. And so recognizing like the privilege of me personally, but also of like many coming together here and saying like, how do we respond to the moment? Because if we're talking about like a game to like shift the system, and you know, I love saying like, if what we're creating is a lightsaber factory, how do we make blue ones? So, because I recognize the power of a game here. Like this can actually become like, it could spread like wildfire and not actually have a central control like piece, which is one of the reasons why the game rules are so important and why we're thinking really deeply about this stuff. But one of those principles is this like vulnerable transparency, that these conversations are recorded, and like that, like, you know, that the meetings are actually like shared on YouTube, because it creates there's some accountability I feel it creates, that if everybody could see how the journey we got to a recommendation. You know, it's something one mentor of mine, who's like a dear friend, John Perry Barlow, who's like one of the only people to like testify in front of Congress, like completely high on acid, and like tell them that he was, you know, it's just like
yeah.
Like the way you get permission to like do things outside of what normal humans are able to do is like completely like just be more transparent. Like there's nothing that you can get taken down on because you've been completely transparent about who you are. And I think people are craving radical like transparency. Like people want you to be real. And so I think that's just something that I think we could have done better about communicating that in advance, about like how we were going to approach this in the culture. And that's definitely something like I recognize it's almost like a mindset in me that I'm like, it's got to be public. But that's something maybe just we think about as well. It's something I feel strongly about, because I think any sense that like, you know, any sense of us doing this without it being like vulnerably transparent, like we're not learning the lesson of history of like the fact that we are privileged, like we are the privileged few from the process of colonization. And what we're talking about is decolonization and flipping Maslow's hierarchy. It's so important that we recognize that privilege, and we recognize like we're doing like deep race work. We're going to kick off as like a team here, saying like, you know, that it's not just about recognizing that racism exists. It's recognizing that racism is the fact of like so many people in privilege not acting on it, and not playing an actual like assertive role in this. So a lot of stuff there, but it's just like some.
Thank you for sharing that. I also think that like having a live conversation with what you just said is like really important, and you can involve other people in the conversation too, and let people, you know, share who they are through that, and make it, you know, infuse that into the thread of all of these up games, right? Like you can do this tangibly and intangibly. Tangibly by having a physical conversation where everyone is hearing it, and even if they don't necessarily watch the whole journey, in your highlights, this is one of your tenets and it's very visible. And then intangibly by involving people who are not the same race, right? And making an active effort to create that diversity through all these different layers of the game, right?
Yeah, and that's I think where like the players, like, you know, us getting to a point where we can really invite now you as a founding game player to like bring in that diversity of perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what Andrea said. Sound is transparent. Hell yeah. And I'm so happy you started with sound, because sound is everything. And so I'm so excited that you guys did sound first.
Well, we had some wise counsel in it before, you know, the one said.
Oh, and I like this game character thing. Andrea, I would love to hear a little bit more on what you mean by that too.
Well, it's I mean, it's almost like when you're writing a story, there's different avatars or different characters that people are playing, and like when you're talking about all the different, you know, ethnicity, where they came from, time in their life. I mean, if you look at all the different people, it's like you're showing them as different characters. If you look at Mortal Kombat as a game, you look at, they were from all over the world, and they all had specific things that they were wearing and specific types of fights that they were doing. So it's kind of like the same thing that we're doing in the game. It's like people are bringing their sound from different cultures. And like, I lived in Phoenix, and there's the Museum of Instruments, and it's literally all the different instruments from all over the world, different cultures. So you have like different setup that is available that you're like, oh my God, I feel so pulled to Africa, even though I'm American. And it's like all these different things. So it's like characters are like, it's not being like, oh, I'm just this character, but it's like you can shift characters as well. It's like, even you've seen it in TikTok, people say, I think one of them was like a TikTok that was like different characters, and it was using Mortal Kombat as a background. And it's like, that's what we are in sound as well, and in life and food and all the other different community things. Yeah.
Yeah, we all play these different roles. You're so right.
Yeah.
And maybe character is actually like, we want to introduce deeply into the game the invitation for people to step into particular archetypes. And archetypes is like a jargon, like a kind of, you know, it's like, game characters is essentially like a shorthand for game archetypes that I think you can do. I'm super excited about. I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. So Shane, thank you for your contributions. Andrea, like, just massive gratitude.
So much gratitude.
So,
oh my God.
Me
everybody's coming through.
Yeah. Serena, thank you. Emil, thank you so much.
We are so happy
Serena,
to be here. What?
Would you mind closing us with, I was thinking of you last night. I put on Debbie prayer, but like maybe something from that beautiful voice of yours could close us up.
Oh,
I'm gonna go get my Shruti box really quickly because I haven't warmed up.
Perfect. Yay, thank you.
What?
We're so taken care of.
Wild, man.
Well, it's like you come into the sound and it's like a buffet. It's like you can have anything at any time. I mean, you're like, I came in, but I'm like, where are these people all coming from? Like, oh my God, it's amazing.
Okay, let's do it.
This little thing in. How fun. I got this like mini portable mic. My boyfriend got it for me. Have you guys seen these before? These like round mics that pick up the music from every side.
Oh, maybe that's what we need.
Yes, yeah. If anyone has specific technology, we want to make sure that we're getting probably just a conference calling. Danny, if you've got a minute, you might enjoy this breath. Just
Sure.
Serena's about to treat us with some magic.
I take a treat.
Okay, got my mic on. It looks like it's working. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can't quite see you though. There you
I'm
go.
coming back. Charlie, it's okay. I'm gonna take you out right after this. He's like, motherfucker, I gotta pee. So, I think what's coming to me is this. I have the voice range for it. Can you guys hear the Shruti?
Mm-hmm.
Play it softly. Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitu Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yonaha Prachodayat Om Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitu Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yonaha Prachodayat Om Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitu Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yonaha Prachodayat. Take a deep breath with me and release on a snake-like sound. My Shruti boxes got caught with the bed sheet. I apologize, but I hope that was all right.
It wasn't just all right. It was.
That was amazing.
That was
Thanks so much, Serena.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you guys. What a great way to start the day.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Serena. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow at 11.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.